Russia, the summer of 1942. The Germans are on the move again. The Sixth Army, Hitler's largest, victorious in France, almost victorious in the first year of the Russian campaign. Now it has a new task: to fight further east than the Wehrmacht has ever fought before, to cut Russia in two on the Volga. The German army's plan to destroy Russia by a blitzkrieg in 1941 had failed. And in the attempt, they lost 1 million men. In 1942, they were not strong enough, even with the help of their allies, to attack along the whole front. Hitler turned south to the Caucasus. 3/4 of Russia's oil was there. He divided his forces into two groups. The Sixth Army and the 4th Panzer Army would move first. His plan was to encircle and destroy Soviet armies in the Don Bend, drive east toward Stalingrad, and cut off the Caucasus from the rest of the country. Then, in the main campaign, the other army group would capture Rostov and strike south to the oil fields. The offensive started late. It was high summer before the Sixth Army under Friedrich von Paulus began to move. The armor in front, as usual. The motorized supply columns close behind. The foot soldiers slogged along in the rear. At first, the Russians seemed to melt away. No matter how far the Germans advanced, the Red Army always eluded them. The Germans didn't take many prisoners. They captured territory and towns. The army wanted to keep pressing ahead to encircle the Russians, but couldn't. Time and again, its spearheads had to pause and wait for supplies to catch up. One soldier, Wilhelm Hoffmann, was keeping a diary. He thought the war might soon be over. Perhaps we'll be home by Christmas. The Russians had lost 250,000 troops in the spring. Now they could not afford pitched battles, so they kept retreating. For the Russian commanders, it was a skillful, planned withdrawal. For the Russian troops, it was a demoralizing rout. To Hitler, it was a crushing victory. He thought the Russian armies had been wiped out. So, with the offensive barely 2 weeks old, he started to shift his armies south. At the end of July, his troops entered Rostov, the key to the Caucasus. Hitler now gave absolute priority to the thrust towards the oil fields. He unleashed his fresh southern armies. He diverted the 4th Panzer Army south. He stripped the 6th Army of its fuel and most of its armor and sent them south too. But he still expected the 6th Army to carry on as before. By mid-August, the 6th Army had been on the march for 6 weeks. Late in the afternoon of the 23rd, a panzer column reached the Volga just north of Stalingrad. It cut off river traffic and brought the opposite bank under fire. The infantry dug in along the railway and waited for reinforcements. Though the 6th Army's original mission was now accomplished, Hitler now expected them to take the whole city. Stalingrad was built on bluffs overlooking the Volga and stretched 15 miles along its western bank. The old town, log huts and wooden buildings in the south, a modern center, steel and concrete. To the north, 3 large factories with workers housing nearby. The whole city lay on hilly ground, scored by deep ravines. A Soviet showpiece. Stalin had named it for himself. Stalin had determined to defend the city. He decided not to evacuate most of the civilians. The troops would fight better, he said, for a live city than for a dead one. Air defenses were improvised. Half the anti-aircraft guns in the town had women crews. A workers' militia was recruited. Stalin had coined the slogan, "Not one step back." Troops and security police patrolled the streets. It wasn't all coercion. There was fear of the Germans and patriotism and communist zeal. Comrades and citizens of Stalingrad, each of us must apply ourselves to the task of defending our beloved town, our homes, and our families. Let us barricade every street, transform every district, every block, every house into an impregnable fortress. The 6th Army had not reached the Volga in enough strength to take Stalingrad on its own. its reserves were still far behind. The Luftwaffe was called in to help the ground forces. For 3 days, from August the 23rd, every aircraft available on the Russian front attacked the city. Almost the only defense came from the gunboats on the Volga and from the batteries on the opposite shore.
My guys have fucked up a tiger on Georgia Farm, but we're having a bitch of a time getting maintained.
The city did not fall to air attack, and the shattered buildings were transformed into fortresses. The beginning of September, Russian artillery could harass the Germans from the east bank of the Volga. But the Russian reserves were useless unless they could cross the river and be brought into the city. There were no bridges, and by day, river ferries were under constant Luftwaffe attack. As long as the Russians held any of the western bank, they could send troops into the city. Once across, they could use tunnels dug into the high bluffs and force the Germans to battle for every foot. The German armies held the initiative, but they were at the very end of a precarious supply line. All their troops were committed to the offensive. They had no reserves left if anything went wrong. The Germans launched their first attacks early in September. September the 11th, Wilhelm Hoffmann. Our battalion is fighting in the suburbs of Stalingrad. Firing is going on all the time. Wherever you look is fire and flame. Russian cannon and machine guns are firing out of the burning city. Fanatics. Hoffmann, September the 16th. Our battalion plus tanks is attacking the grain elevator. The battalion is suffering heavy losses. The elevator is occupied not by men but by devils that no bullets or flames can destroy. September the 18th. Fighting is going on inside the elevator. If all the buildings of Stalingrad are defended like this, then none of our soldiers will get back to Germany. September the 20th. The battle for the elevator is still going on. September the 22nd. Russian resistance in the elevator has been broken. Our troops are advancing towards the Volga. We found only about 40 Russians dead in the elevator. The German Army High Command, 1,000 miles away, was beginning to have second thoughts. General Halder, Chief of Staff, had not seriously opposed Hitler's directives earlier in the year. Now, with the original strategic objectives accomplished, he urged caution, but in vain. A member of Halder's staff observed that the Führer used to move his hands in big sweeps over the map. Push here, push there. It was all vague and took no account of practical difficulties. Halder refused to take the responsibility for continuing the advance with winter approaching. Hitler said, "We now need National Socialist ardor rather than professional ability to settle matters in the East. Obviously, I cannot expect this of you." He sacked Halder and replaced him by General Zeitzler, who was thought to be a genius at logistics. A man who would know how to move armies where he, Hitler, wanted them to go. In Stalingrad, the 6th Army's commander was having second thoughts too. Von Paulus's troops were not used to fighting hand-to-hand in bombed-out cities. Here their tanks moved at a snail's pace, yet Hitler insisted, demanded that they take the city. Russian soldier, Anton Goznik, he moved back, occupying one building after another, turning them into strongholds. The soldier would crawl out of an occupied position only when the ground was on fire beneath him and his clothes were smoldering. September the 26th, Hoffman complained about the way the Soviets fought. We don't see them at all. They've established themselves in houses, in cellars. They're firing from all sides, including from our rear. Barbarian. They use gangster methods. Zeitzler, Hitler's new chief of staff, took a long look at the situation and told him the most dangerous positions on the whole Eastern Front are the north front at Stalingrad and the eastern flank of the 4th Panzer Army. If steps are not taken in good time to rectify the situation, there will be a disaster. Hitler replied, "You're too pessimistic, Zeitzler. Here on the Eastern Front, we've been through worse periods than this before you joined us, and we've survived. We'll get over our present difficulties too." The German position was dangerous. 20,000 men a week were being lost in Stalingrad. They could only be replaced by stripping the army's flanks of German troops. Romanians were moving in here. This area was now held by the Italians. Next to them were Hungarians. The most precarious position of all was here, where the Russians held both banks of the River Don. They faced the Romanian Third Army, which had no heavy anti-tank guns and no tanks either. Hitler wasn't worried. He thought, and the High Command's own intelligence confirmed this, that the Russians had no strategic reserves left. In October, the Germans attacked again towards the Volga. Unless they captured the entire river bank, the Russians would bring in troops and supplies at night. Wilhelm Hoffmann, October the 4th. A lot of Russian Tommy gunners have appeared. Where are they bringing them from? Another German wondered, were we really going to have to fight through another of those dreadful Russian winters? Hoffmann on October the 14th. It's been fantastic since morning. Our aeroplanes and artillery have been bombing the Russian positions for hours on end. Panzer Lieutenant Weiner wrote, "Stalingrad is no longer a town. By day it is an enormous cloud of burning, blinding smoke. It is a vast furnace lit by the reflection of the flames. And when night arrives, one of those very hot, noisy, bloody nights, the dogs plunge into the Volga and swim desperately to gain the other bank. The nights of Stalingrad are a terror for them. Animals flee from this hell. The hardest stones cannot bear it for long. Only men endure." Hoffman's diary, October the 22nd. Who would have thought, 3 months ago, that instead of the joy of victory, we would have to endure such sacrifices and torture, the end of which is nowhere in sight. The soldiers are calling Stalingrad the mass grave of the Wehrmacht. From far behind Stalingrad, long columns of Russian tanks and men came that autumn. But only a trickle went to Stalingrad, just enough to keep it from collapsing. The rest went to assembly areas north and south of the city. Newsreels told the Russian public what their leaders wanted them to know, that small arms factories were working round the clock from Moscow to Georgia. Sweethearts were writing letters about production quotas, or wrapping parcels for the front and delivering them by special messenger. Youth groups could adopt their own tanks and even pose with their crew. Groups of workers could buy their own Stormovik and send it off to shoot down Hitlerite invaders. But the underlying message was clear. The terrible days of shortage were over. Now at last, the Red Army was getting all it needed. When it seemed likely that Stalingrad would hold out, its generals were filmed. General Yeremenko, commander of the Stalingrad front, found time to distribute medals. Stalin's speeches were much read to the troops. There was even a Stalingrad oath. Its burnt-out houses, its ruins, its very stones are sacred. The war went on. The Russians ferried their troops across the Volga and the Don and crammed them into the bridgeheads they had held since the summer. The Russians dug in and waited. The Germans now held 9/10 of the city. On November the 8th, Hitler made an after-dinner speech in Munich.
Sondern ich wollte zur Wolga kommen.
I wanted to get to the Volga, at a particular point where stands a certain town, bears the name of Stalin himself. I wanted to take the place, and you know we've done it. We've got it, really, except for a few enemy positions still holding out. Now people say, why don't they finish the job more quickly? Well, I prefer to do the job with quite small assault groups. Time is of no consequence at all. Was creeping up on the Germans. even before Hitler's speech, the Russian winter. The Germans knew what was coming. Soon, it would be 30, 40, 50 degrees below freezing. Equipment and men would freeze. But the Russians would keep going. The Russians tried to keep their build-up a secret, but they could neither move all their men by night, nor hide completely 750,000 new troops. On November the 10th, von Paulus asked Hitler to let him withdraw from Stalinfrag. Hitler told him to keep attacking. The Russian build-up went on. On November the 19th, the Russians struck. They attacked the Romanians from the north, and 2 days later, from the south. Within hours, the Russian tanks were through. Russian plans were ambitious. Their two pincers would cut through the Romanians and link at Kalach. That would trap the German Sixth Army. They would reduce the Stalingrad pocket and could then strike southeast towards Rostov. That would trap all the Germans in the Caucasus.
Not too bad.
Just 4 days after the offensive began, the two Russian armies did link up. It had all gone so quickly, there was no time to film it, so it was reenacted for the cameras.